Wonderful. Thank you. Hi, my name is Adrian. I'm an engineering manager at Apple, and this talk is going to be about how to design a debugging experience for concurrency. At Splash last year, Robert O'Callaghan, you might know him as the author of the RR tool, gave a keynote on the state of debugging. And in this talk, he called out that so far no pairing of a compiler and debugger have ever attempted to produce a debugging experience for a language with async await constructs. And doing so would be a significant engineering effort. And he's right. This does need some careful design. I would like to talk about Swift concurrency, where we went the extra mile and designed it with debugging in mind right from the start. Swift concurrency adds async await keywords, a structured concurrency, and an actor programming model to the Swift programming language. We introduced it as part of the Swift 5.5 release in 2021, and we introduced it with full debugger support that was implemented in LLDB. And by full debugger support, I mean that it feels just like debugging synchronous code. You can do backtraces, step through your code, and inspect local variables. Let me explain to you how async await code breaks pretty much every assumption that a debugger makes, and how we still manage to produce backtraces and display variables, and how we generate the debug info to make that possible. In traditional synchronous code, you will find things like the return address, function parameters, local variables, etc. on the stack. And that's wonderful for the debugger. It can unwind the stack to recover the values of variables in parent frames and so on. But if we take this example and turn it into asynchronous code by sprinkling the await and async keywords all over the place, the execution model but also the compilation pipeline changes fundamentally. First off, the compiler will break apart every function at the await boundaries. And this is done using a pass called the LLVM coroutine splitter, which is actually shared infrastructure that's also used by the C++ coroutine implementation in LLVM. And every one of the resulting funclets ends in either a tail call or a task switch. And that means that the next funclet is potentially executed even on a different thread. And because they're executed on a different thread, the function arguments can't be passed on a stack. They're actually moved onto the heap into a data structure called the async context. Let's look at that data structure in more detail. So as you can see here, the modified code has just a single function argument, which is the pointer to this async context heap data structure. And inside of that data structure, we find, among other things, a continuation pointer, which is the address of the next funclet that we want to schedule when we're done executing the current funclet. In addition to the continuation pointer, we also find pointers to function arguments, and if your function had a local variable that needs to actually survive from one funclet to the next, it's also spilled onto the heap by the coroutine splitter and also is accessible through this async context data structure. And each continuation can have its own continuation and so on. Now that you have a better understanding of what goes on behind the scenes, let's take a look at how we can produce a meaningful backtrace. If you just ask any debugger to produce a backtrace at this breakpoint here, you will get something that looks like this. And what I want you to notice here is that there's just a single function that is actually user-written code, and everything else is some random system library calls that are just there to schedule this one function on a new thread. This is technically correct, but also completely useless for an end user. So can we do better? What really is a backtrace? The programmer's mental model suggests that the backtrace tells them where the program execution came from. But if you think about how the backtrace is produced by following the return addresses, it's actually also telling us like where we're going to go next. And the continuation pointers in the async data structure also tell us where execution goes next. So a debugger can follow the chain of continuations and produce what we call a virtual backtrace. And indeed, if you run the backtrace command in LLDB at this place, you will get a backtrace that looks exactly like the programmer would expect it, with the user-written functions in exactly the order that looks natural. So that's backtraces. Let's now look at variables. As I mentioned earlier, function parameters and spilled locals are spilled onto the heap and are accessible in this async context data structure. And the Swift API dedicates a register to pass the address of this data structure to every funclet. So if you take a look at the debug info that the compiler produces, we find a pretty long dwarf expression that we're going to dissect now. So first thing I want you to notice is there's a register being mentioned here, and that's not just any register, it's the register that is used by the Swift API to pass in the address of the async context. But this is only valid at the beginning of the function because it's a register, so the compiler will use it to store other things across the lifetime of the function. So we mark it up with a DWOP entry value, which denotes that we are interested in the contents of that register at the beginning of the function. And then there is a long tail of dwarf expression, and all that this expression does, it's basically the access path through the async heap data structure to point to the storage of the variable that we're interested in. And how do you generate such an access path? In LLVM, we have Salvage debug info, which is basically a compiler from LLVM IR to dwarf expression, and that's exactly what we're using here. So this design of describing every variable relative to this special register has a really clever property, and that's that it also works in parent frames. Why is this special? So if you think about synchronous code, the debugger would unwind the stack to recover locals and restore the value of registers in the parent frames. But in an async function, there is no parent frame. I mean, both the word parent and frame are misnomers here. We just have continuations that we haven't even executed yet. So because the API dedicates a register to pass the address of the async context, and we're pointed to the beginning of the function, we know that the only possible value that this register can have is the address of the async context. So an unwinder plugin can recover the correct value of that register by following the chain of continuations into the right context and plugging in that value. And that's how we make the same variable description work in both actual frames and also in virtual parent frames. Neat. So what have we learned today? I showed you how we co-designed an API, a compiler, and a debugger for a debugging experience that supports async and await. In the API, we made sure to design it so that there's a dedicated location to pass in this async context heap data structure. In LLVM, we extended the coroutine cloner to describe all variables as entry values and produce the access paths for them. And then we modified the rest of the compilation pipeline to basically just leave these values alone. On the debugger side, we're walking the continuations to produce virtual backtraces and also simulate stepping. And this is something I have not covered in this talk. And the unwinder knows how to recover the value of the async register in dwarf expressions. And the extensions that we made to LLVM are currently being contributed back to the LLVM project. So if you see patches that are dealing with entry values, this is what those are about. Thank you.